Tonight on Philly Sports Spotlight, Phillies fan favorite Darren Daulton dealing with not one but two brain tumors. We'll talk about his options and the possible road to recovery after surgery. The 76ers stole the headlines on draft night as they traded away an all-star with their sights set on building for their future. And it was a roller derby extravaganza in the city of Sisterly Shove this weekend. We'll let you know all about it coming up on Philly Sports Spotlight. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Philly Sports Spotlight. I'm Phil Andrews, and tonight we open with the serious subject of brain tumors. And we do so with a focus on everybody's favorite former Philly, Darren Daulton, who unfortunately was recently diagnosed with two brain tumors. Dutch, of course, played for the Phillies from 1983 to 1997 and finished his career with the Florida Marlins in '97, winning a World Series in that final season. Now joining us on the set of Philly Sports Spotlight, Dr. Ethan Bernadetti, the Director of Neurosurgical Services at Kennedy Hospital. And the good doctor is here to kind of help us better understand the situation. And Doc, I guess the best place to start is with the different classifications of tumors.
Yeah, I'll try to explain that without being too technical. First thing when we talk about brain tumors is we talk about whether they're benign versus malignant. Benign tumors typically being slower growing and not invading the actual normal brain tissue, whereas malignant tumors tend to be more rapidly growing and invading normal brain, often causing more problems for the patient. In addition, we talk about tumors that are primary versus metastatic. Primary tumors being ones that actually start on the brain or on the coverings of the brain versus metastatic, which means that they spread from somewhere else in the body, like somebody who has lung cancer and then develops a brain tumor, which is actually a spread of their lung cancer to the brain. Another technical term is intraaxial versus extraaxial. Intraaxial being a tumor that's actually inside the brain, whereas extraaxial being one that might grow on the covering of the brain and push on the brain, still might cause problems, but it's not actually in the brain tissue. And then finally, you often hear people talk about low grade versus high grade. The grading system, basically low grade indicating that something is slower growing, more on the benign side, whereas high grade typically is something that's more rapidly growing and more likely to be malignant.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I want everybody at home to know that you are not privy to Dutch's specific situation, but he went under the knife yesterday, had his first surgery yesterday. If that were your patient, what would you be looking for as you go into that patient's brain?
Well, as a neurosurgeon, first as a human being, we always hope that it's going to be low grade and more benign, but we have no control over that. As a neurosurgeon, what we want to do for the patient is typically get a diagnosis, which means that we'll send tissue to the laboratory and the pathologist will tell us what kind of a tumor it is. And then if we can, we'd like to take out as many tumor cells as we can. So we're always hoping for a gross total resection. Sometimes that's not possible and only a subtotal resection will be done because to do more might damage the patient in a permanent way.
Let me ask you this. We got some pictures that you were kind enough to bring with you. Here's what we call, I'm not a doctor, I don't even play one on TV, but a benign brain tumor. And you got to explain to us, we're looking at, it looks like a rear shot and a side shot. What are we looking at right here?
Yeah, so this is from a patient that had a very large benign tumor actually growing on the covering of the brain, and it was pushing into the brain, but it was actually benign and could be cured with surgery. Right. So it wasn't invading the brain at all. So surgery was the only treatment that this patient needed.
And that looked like it was a rather actually large tumor. Now here's another benign tumor. This one looks like it's on the frontal lobe, and then you've got one from shooting down from the top. What's the difference between this one and the last one?
Well, this one's a little smaller. What was interesting was that it was also benign, so it could be cured with surgery, but it was actually pushing on the bone of the skull, so it had eroded the bone a little bit. But with surgery, this one was also cured.
All right, now obviously it doesn't take a neurosurgeon to figure out that tumors can also be problematic. There's also the bad ones too, and you talked about them a little bit, touched earlier, malignant. Talk about that a little bit more.
Well, malignant tumors often need a combination of treatments. So typically surgery to establish the diagnosis and to remove as many tumor cells as possible. And then usually the treatment has to be followed up with an oncologist, and additional treatments such as radiation and chemotherapy is usually given. Often these tumors, unfortunately, are not curable, but we're looking to prolong the patient's life and improve their quality of life.
Yeah, that would be the worst case scenario. Now, there's a twist of irony here with the Darren Daulton situation, because he's now the third former Philly to actually be diagnosed with brain tumors. Back in 2003, former Philly Tug McGraw was diagnosed with a brain tumor. 2 years prior to that, former Philly John Vukovich, also diagnosed. McGraw had surgery to remove his tumor in 2003. Doctors thought they had excised the entire tumor. Unfortunately, they did not, and in January of 2004, Tug passed away. He was 59. John Vukovich, also 59 when he passed. So that was also having surgery. So Doc, as a person who deals with this on a day-to-day basis, is this coincidence, or are there some other explanations that why three guys from the same field, same organization would develop these brain tumors?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's, in cancer epidemiology, sometimes you see clusters of patients developing the same tumor, and I think it's something that needs to be followed up, basically. I think it's a very, the incidence of these tumors in the population in general is very low.
Okay.
And 3 people that had contact with each other in during a certain period of time, it's certainly something that I think somebody should look at a little further.
Yeah,
but we can't draw any specific
Well, I will tell you that
right
the
now.
people have talked to me about this, and they say, do you think it was the vet? Because the vet was such an old building, asbestos, they all played in that same building. So I'm not going to put you on the spot, but that's just what some of the things are that are floating. Doc, first of all, thank you very much for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
I think you've helped, well, of course, anytime. I might have you back. I think you've helped explain it a little bit better. There's a lot of people out there that love Dutch, one of the most beloved Phillies, and our prayers here at Philly Sports Spotlight and WMCM are also with him. With that said, time now for tonight's Future Fitness Trivia question, and it has to deal with Darren Daulton. On October 1st, 1983, the Phillies catcher made his first appearance behind the plate. Who was the Phillies starting pitcher that day? The answer, of course, coming up later in the show. Future Fitness, no one in the Delaware Valley does fitness better. Time now to take our first break, but when we return, it's a trip to the barbershop with the newest Sixer, Nerlens Noel. Stay tuned.